please introduce yourself?
Gladly. Thank you, Sue. It's lovely to be here. I'm Carrie West. I have written a book, Life Rewritten. It became an international bestseller. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and talk about that. Um, I'm also a narrative coach and a speaker. So people have asked me what's a narrative coach, and there's a branch of psychology called narrative therapy. I'm not a psychologist, but what I am is a storyteller. And so I use my background in storytelling to help people sort through any number of issues that they might be dealing with.
So good. Oh my goodness. And it's all about the stories we tell ourselves, right?
It sure is. It sure is.
Mm,
Life is this huge story,
it
an
is,
epic, dramatic, crazy ass story, but it's a
for
story.
sure. What is your vision, Carrie?
Okay. Um, the story saved my life, and I mean that literally.
Oh,
I I had a really difficult beginning to life. I was rejected day one.
mm,
Parents didn't want me, did the very, very minimal, and sometimes even less than the minimal to keep me going. Stories kept me alive. So at night, I remember my first memories are lying in bed, not able to sleep, and telling myself a story so I could sleep. And my stories were about my real family that was looking for me, and they were larger than life, and they were great, and they bought me clothes, they gave me great food, they did all these wonderful things for me. So it was the only way I could fall asleep. It was my form of comforting, self-comforting, so I could make it through another day. And as I grew up and sorted out that view of this life, I ended up going to film school. I went to the American Film Institute, and always, before that, I always kept journals. I always told stories in my journals. They, again, kept me alive. It kept me my vivid imagination. Didn't know it at the time, but I was visioning a new world. I was visioning a different life for myself. Didn't know it at the time, but that's what I was doing. So then when I went to film school, we were prepping one of our many film projects, and we were sitting there talking about characters and themes and plots and how everything fell together. And I had this aha moment of, holy crap, it's a story. My life is a story. And if that's the case, I can change it. I can write a different ending. I can write a different plot. I can pick up new characters. Oh my gosh, and that started me on this journey of looking at life as a story and working with it from that perspective. But I wanna be clear, a lot of people say, "So you reframe what people are doing." It's like, mm-mm.
mm,
I create understanding. I help you to understand it. When you talk about an origin story, when I look at my origin story, when we're born, we walk into a play that's in the second act.
mm,
Right? Our
mhm.
parents have this whole history and they have their own origin story that they've been living. If you have siblings, they're a part of this story at whatever phase, act 1 or act 2, depending on their age. But you walk in dead center. It's like you're walking on stage that's on a play that's been going on and you have no idea what it's about. You haven't talked to a director, you haven't seen a script. So you're like,
Line.
line. Yeah, exactly. Line. And so how do you create your story? What is that foundation of your story? So I get into the belonging. You need to belong. It's a survival thing, but belonging is one of our first needs. So I realized that if we could look at that and understand it, understand who these people were and the story that they were living before we jumped in, honestly, I could forgive them. I could forgive all of it and live my life and build my story. And then I realized that everything they did made me who I am. So here I am, a little over 30 at this point,
Me too.
thinking, I can turn this all around.
Mm,
I went from this horrible beginning to this amazing life that I have now in Santa Barbara, California. The only downside is I have this dog who thinks he's in charge of our life, and he's he's kind of a bully. He's always demanding things, so we have to deal with him. But but I can now, using this concept and this view, I don't reframe it. I change your perspective. I change your understanding of the situation.
Mm,
And working with people individually, working with businesses, of all the businesses you could have started, why did you pick that one? What is your origin story for your business?
mm,
Then you can take that apart. When you understand it, it's like, oh, I've had more people have aha moments just getting them to understand their origin story, where they came from. So if I could change, if I could talk to everybody about their original story, their backstory, or how they became who they are today, it changes almost instantly. It doesn't even feel like you have to go through this big whole process of change. You just have this understanding and awareness that that a lot of these stories weren't ours. Half of the stories that I was living about life is hard, or you have to work hard and work 90 hours a week just to get by. That's my parents' story. My parents were immigrants that had rough lives coming in. That was their story. Why
mm,
do I have to take that on?
mm.
Can't I believe that life is beautiful, and you can create wonderful magical things really easily? Does it have to be you have to work 90 hours a week to barely get by?
Mm,
That's hardship and struggle?
mm,
No. I don't think life was intended to be hard and difficult. I think we were given this beautiful playground, and we've turned it into this dramatic fight sequence almost from some
mm,
big epic battleground.
mm,
So that's my vision. I think if we challenge these original stories we've been given,
mhm.
we become a lot happier.
I can see that. That's incredible. And tell me more about how it looks like when you're working with a business owner, as far as like I can see how this would be almost therapeutic, maybe even
Hmm.
more than therapeutic for like a
Yeah.
personal side for sure. Where does this work for, a business as far as figuring out their business origin story? What happens next?
Well, it's so funny. I'll answer that with an example. My partner is a musician. He plays classical bassoon, and he has this really fascinating conductor that he works with on a regular basis. And I said to him one time, "Maestro, can I talk to you about your origin story?" He says, "Yeah, sure." And turns out he's Italian, but he was raised in Switzerland. And even as an 8 or 9 year old, you know, playing music happened almost immediately. A lot of these musicians, even my partner, he picked up instruments when he was 3 years old. He was always fascinated with it.
Oh,
So I said, "Maestro, how did it start?" And he said, "Well, me and my cousins, when we were 8 or 9 years old, we'd grab our instruments and we'd go into, some area and we'd play. And I always found I had to tell them where they needed to sit and how they needed to perform." And I said, "Do you see how that affected you becoming a maestro?" And he said, "No, I don't think it." It's like, okay, maestro. So here you are, a 9 year old, and you're already organizing all these other musicians and telling them what parts to play and how it's going to sort out. Can you get that? And he went, "Oh, you're right. I had no idea."
wow.
I said, "So how does that fit for you now that you have that awareness?" And he said, "That brings me great joy."
Mm,
And then he thanked me. He said, "I was starting to feel like I was getting stale in the work I was doing, because even if it's creative, if it gets repetitious, you don't it's not as enjoyable." But when he started remembering the joy he had with his cousins and his friends as kids,
mm,
and as kids, we haven't learned yet about how you're supposed to do things or what you should be doing. So he remembered that, and that he's been saying that his work since that conversation has just been exponentially more fulfilling.
wow.
He brought some of that forth, that remembering of how much fun he had when he was just playing with his cousins.
That's
So
amazing.
so in some other cases, I've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs and it's like, "Well, why did you pick that business?" And by the way, even if it's because this is something you felt you could make money at, great. But there's still a reason why you chose to become a chef rather than an accountant.
Mhm.
When I talk to accountants, it's inevitably my parents always enjoyed um, their budgeting and that, and I always felt like I connected. There's typically some connection with the family. When you're a chef and you want to start your own restaurant, there's some connection in your childhood that around cooking. My mom was a great cook. For all of her shortcomings, she really could bake and she was a great cook. So there's one of my sisters is a chef and she knew all mom's recipes and she had all that stuff. It's so fascinating. So the other part of it too is sometimes these accountants take on I worked with a different accountant who took this on because his parents pushed him to say
Mm.
accounting will always mean you'll always have a job. And he hated numbers. He he was probably like me. I can barely handle an Excel spreadsheet, but but his parents thought if you take a job as an accountant, you always have work. You'll never be
Mhm.
out of work, which is a common thing for people when they start a business or they're picking a career. It's what were we told we should do?
Mm.
And when I hear should, I think, tell me that story. What story? Who told you you should do this? What's that story? And it's inevitably, well, the schools said I did well
Mm.
in sciences, so I should be a doctor, or or I passed some interest test that said I should do this, so I take that career. And starting a business is the same thing. You are running a bunch of stories about why you'll start this business. Now, there's a difference between the type of business they start and why they decided to go on their own versus working for somebody else.
Mhm.
So that's a whole different set of stories. If you have started a business, back to the accountant, you started a financial consulting business. You do a lot of financial consulting. I had another client who just loved helping people with their wealth portfolios. Felt that it was like playing Clue or strategy. It was one of these, or chess.
Hmm.
Chess is a very complex game. So they excelled at that type of an environment. So
Mm.
financial planning to them was different than being an accountant.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's fascinating to me how they put this together, and you can always trace it back to something in their origin story. And
Mm.
when you, I was talking with a guy who wanted tenure, had been trying forever to get tenure, and would shift to universities hoping to get tenure. And he was getting ready to do it again, and he called me and he said, "Look, I need to get tenure." And I said, "Why? Why do you need it?" Oh, job security. And okay, where did that come from?
Mm.
Well, my parents, and it inevitably comes back. And it's like, so what was your parents' relationship with their parents? Oh, my grandparents were awesome. But how did your parents get along with them? Oh my God, my mom hated her mother because her mother kept pushing her to do stuff, blah, blah, blah. I said, do you see how that rolls down the generational story? And your
Mm.
mom was pushing you because, and he was like, oh, huh. After 5 sessions, he had tenure.
Wow.
And it was when he said, you're right. I'm gonna quit trying so hard. It'll happen or it won't happen. I know I'm a great professor, teacher. I'll always have work. I'm not gonna worry about it." Son of a gun, if a tenure position didn't open and they called him. He
Amazing.
didn't have to apply for it. He didn't have to do anything.
Even better.
Yeah. So I promise you, if it's a CEO of a corporation, if it's a chief executive, if it's a middle management, there's an origin story to that. Teachers are another great one. A lot of women are teachers because they were told as young women the teaching profession is a great profession for you.
Mhm.
Now, not always true. Some people do it because that's their way. They want to help kids. They like working with kids. They want to help them. But it's so important to understand that origin story. And more often than not, it brings together this sense of fulfillment of
Mm.
why you've picked this business that you want to go into, or this career path that you want to do.
Tell me more. So fulfillment, I could see that being like kind of closing the loop, like
Mhm.
understanding why you're in this. What other, what else does it do for them to
Well,
have that?
sometimes it sets them free.
Mm.
I had another client who became a lawyer
Mhm.
because dad was a lawyer and his dad was a lawyer, and that's what we did. We were a family of lawyers, and he was miserable. Absolutely miserable. Wasn't very good at it, had been doing it for 15 years and was still an associate, still
Mm.
hadn't even gotten anything like a partner track, and he actually I said to him, "Well, what if you had a perfect world?" Because he kept saying, "Well, I'm 40 years old now, I can't change careers now, I'm stuck." And it's like, "Dude, you wanna know when I started this career? You don't wanna know how old I was when I started this career. You just don't." And and he said, "Well, what could I do?" And I said, "Well, you make a plan." It turned out he wanted to become a graphic artist.
Hmm.
And I said, "Do you wanna take a class? Take a class and see if that's what you really wanna do." There's a lot of night classes. There's a lot of things you can do online right now just to see before you blow up, an income,
Mm.
see if you can do this. Well, it turns out he took one course, he loved it. Then he did a weekend adult learning program, loved that, and actually built a portfolio for himself and actually did become a designer.
Wow.
Found his path. It took him a little bit of time. It didn't happen overnight, but he
Mm.
built his confidence level with his skill set, and then he needed to get strong because, of course, his parents, who were both retired at that point, thought he was nuts for doing it. So there was
Mm.
also that kind of coaching to help him deal with that kind of a shift. But he
Yeah,
was happier than he'd ever been.
that's so cool.
Yeah.
So cool. Now,
So
how does
so
your book fit into this?
my book, Life Rewritten, is the foundational beginnings of why I picked this path,
Mm.
and it talks about the elements of storytelling and how I applied those to my life, and then I provide a how-to section in each book, so you don't have to go and buy a workbook after you buy the book. It's pretty straightforward. I start off with a story from my life and the story element that goes along with that, and then how to apply that to your life. My next book, which will be out hopefully by the fall, is Business Rewritten. And
Mm.
it's again how you can apply these same principles to business. So I figured life is first, then business rewritten. And then I have another book, Money Rewritten, which talks about the money messages we've been given and
Mm.
how to deal with the money stories that we carry so that you can live. I have what I call the wealth, prosperity, and abundance quotient, or IQ, the WPA IQ. Most people think of money. They don't think about prosperity or abundance and what that means. And so I take apart the money stories we've been given so that you can apply that, because the money stories we've been given affect our careers, affect our choices with
Mm.
businesses we start. It's an underlying theme that affects everybody's life
Mm.
is their money. But again, I call it the wealth, prosperity, and abundance index because that's really what we're talking about. Money is an intangible concept. It's really not something cold, hard fact. So Life Rewritten was the start where I
Mhm.
introduced these ideas of looking at the actual story elements. I look at characters, themes, plots, inciting incidents. The inciting incident, you know what that is as a writer.
Yeah.
Why did you take this journey right now? What event? What happened?
Mm.
For me, it was when my father died. I hit rock bottom, and that was it. That told me I needed to really take a look at my life and deal
Mhm.
with it. And that sent me on this journey. There's inciting incident. Why did you start this business at this time?
Mhm.
Are you solving a problem, or are you addressing something, or are you taking over a business, or is this just where your skills lie? So understanding that inciting incident, why is such a foundational thing to know. So that's all covered in Life Rewritten, and then from there, I take it into these other ideas.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your vision and becoming a Vision Pro yourself.